This is Bigfoot Crossroads. My name's Matt, and I am joined by the host of the Tinfoil Tales podcast, Brandon. Brandon has been on this show before, talking about his own experience, and he agreed to join me to go over a person's email that they sent me. This person did not feel comfortable with coming on the air themselves, but they were willing to allow me to read their experience and discuss it here. And I thought, this guy kind of reminds me of Brandon. Not exactly the same situation, of course, but there's some similarities that stuck out to me. So I really wanted to get your input. So, yeah, man, thanks for joining me.
Hey, not a problem. Always glad to talk with you and dive into some weird stuff.
Well, let's get right into it. This is a pretty long one. Hello, my name is Ryan, and I currently live in Huntsville, Texas, next to the National Forest. My encounter happened in September of 2019, next to Lake Conroe. I'm now 45 years of age. I had lived at the property for 2 years prior to anything happening. Our dog had puppies, and we wouldn't let them out during the day with the mama dog in a pen. The pen was farther away from the house and closer to the tree line of the forest, as it was right in our backyard. I came home from work one day, and my wife said 2 of the puppies were gone. We figured someone probably walked up and took them while my wife was inside or something. Throughout that week, I'm sad to say all the puppies ended up coming up missing, with no clue as to what happened to them. I caught a lot of criticism from others for having them outside, but I couldn't keep them inside our trailer house all the time. I had taken notice to Daisy, our dog, acting weird from time to time. I didn't really think anything of it. A day or two goes by, and I get a knock at my door, and it was a neighbor from down the street asking if we have seen their dog, which was missing. At this point, I knew something was going on. I told them about our puppies that went missing, and that we'd keep an eye out for their dog. Coming home from work the next day, there was a sign hanging up on the stop sign at the end of our street about another person's missing dog. We called the pound, but they were never even in our neighborhood. Here's where things started to change. The next week I got home from work, and as I exited my truck, a lady pulled up and told me she had seen a wolf in the tree line next to my property. She said she couldn't see the whole thing as it was in the bushes and it was really thick, but she had seen its head and that it was big. Surely I thought she was mistaken. I researched that area of the forest for wolves, and they haven't been in that area in over 30 years. What seemed to set everything in motion for all of this was my wife and I went in the woods behind our property just to have a look back there. Once we got back there, about 100 to 150 yards from my house, there were 2 trees uprooted with 2 big holes left in the ground. Weird thing is there was no visible marks of heavy equipment or tire tracks, nothing indicating that machine pulled these trees out of the ground. At that moment, my wife said to me, "Babe, look, that looks like a big X." Sure as hell, it was a big X made out of 2 trees, the exact 2 trees from the holes in the ground. At least that's what we thought, as we didn't see any other trees in the shape that these were in. I took pictures of this. At no time was I ever thinking about cryptids, wasn't even on my radar. When we got home, all I did was put a big X in the woods in search bar of Google, and it pulled up Sasquatch. I had a laugh, but at the same time, seriously, what would have the strength to put 2 grown trees in the position it was in? I now know that these are said to be markers or warnings to stay out. Okay, so stopping there for a second, what are your thoughts so far about what's going on?
The mentioning of the wolf, I know people say their wolves haven't been around in certain areas for a long time, but I don't think animals necessarily have any sort of boundaries.
Right.
And they typically can wander off. I know they say they don't have bears here in my area, but just a few years ago, one was randomly spotted. They also say we don't have mountain lions, but every once in a while I see people posting up photos from their trail cams of a pretty big mountain lion looking cat. So I wouldn't rule out known animals, but when you got to the point where there's X's and the tree roots and everything up, I don't see normal animals doing that. So for me, that's kind of a weird situation.
Yeah. So this guy, whenever he emailed me, he would have no way of knowing this. I actually have family that lives in this exact area. And I also know quite a few people that live in this exact same area. And I can say pretty matter-of-factly that if there are wolves in that area, it's going to be a situation where they escaped from captivity. There's absolutely zero chance of there being any wild wolves down there. The closest thing would be a Mexican red wolf, which doesn't really fit the description at all. They are more akin to like a coyote in stature and everything, and they are extremely rare. And I'm not aware of any sign. I mean, the general consensus is that they're not even out there anymore. They're trying to like bring them back. So a wolf in Texas, let alone this part of Texas, seems highly unlikely. Another thing about this, whenever I say that I have family that lives in the area, I mean, I have family that lives within 30 minutes of where this guy is talking about. Because he eventually sent me like the exact locations of his property. And coincidentally, pets do go missing very often in this area. The ones left outside, at least. A lot of people, my family in particular, had chickens and pigs and goats and cats and dogs and everything else on their property. And pretty much everything except for one large pig got taken from the backyard, which was sitting in a forested area. Now, of course, my, Bigfoot brain instantly went to a monster's taking them. They didn't agree with that. And, as you well know, animals do go missing whenever you leave them outside. There are many culprits out there. You've dealt with that yourself.
Mm-hmm. Especially raccoons.
Yeah.
But they're not gonna take bigger animals. They've taken some chickens and my poor duck and other things, but they've never took anything big.
Yeah, like puppies.
My thing about it is, I was gonna say, like, I could see, I don't know about a puppy, but even hawks. We get hawks flying around all the time out here, and we actually have bald eagles nesting within a couple miles from here. And I've seen them sitting in a tree across the road staring towards my property. I was like, they're looking for my chickens.
Yeah.
Because why not? Easy meal. So there's all sorts of things that could take puppies or any type of smaller animal. When you start to get into like the bigger livestock, then like a goat. I have goats. Nothing's come and took my goat.
No chupacabra?
No chupacabra, which, completely off topic, I am very disappointed that the chupacabra used to look like an alien with spikes on its back and a big old snake tongue, and now it's just a hairless dog-looking thing.
Yeah, it's completely changed over the years.
I miss the old-style chupacabra. That was my favorite.
Yeah, the original goat sucker.
Right. I want to live in that early 90s, mid-90s fantasy of the goat sucker coming around, and I thought it was just like an alien, a vampire alien when I was a kid.
It was a good time for cryptozoology.
As far as what the story from him, I don't know what would be taking like larger animals. And like I said, with the X, as soon as that got brought up, I thought of Sasquatch stuff just because it seems to be very common.
Yeah.
But me being kind of a conspiracy brain person too, if I was stealing someone's puppies, because that's the other thing around here. People have been stealing dogs a lot, like right out of people's backyards, like full-grown dogs.
Yeah, that's a thing here too.
No one ever knows where they go. Like their dog, they got them on camera. Like someone comes over, picks up the dog, takes off with it. Where'd these dogs go? Like, what are they doing with them? So I wouldn't say a person wouldn't do it, but I don't see a person coming out there and uprooting some trees and putting an X out there. It's kind of strange.
Yeah. All right, let's get back into it. I need to lay out how our house sat on the road. We lived down a dirt road, and our house was on the corner of a lot, and the road curved and went down alongside the tree line of the forest. For the week, Daisy, our dog, was going to the corner out in the road and barking all the time, sometimes to where I had to go get her and tell her to come on so she would shut up. One morning, I would say around 5:30 to 6 a.m., I was outside on my porch. My wife had left for work already, and I heard Daisy barking like crazy, like she had done all week. I slid my sandals on and went out to the road and saw Daisy kind of acting crazy. I was calling her, but she wouldn't come, so I started walking towards her direction. I thought once she seen me coming towards her, she would stop and come towards me, but that didn't happen. She shot off like a bullet, running down the tree line. At that point, I knew she was after something. I ran down the road, and as I rounded the corner, she was about 60 yards from me, making a beeline for the edge of the trees. I rounded the corner, and just as I did, to the left of me, something exploded. When I say exploded, not like a bomb, but something big was running towards me in the brush. Mind you, it was thick. It caught my attention right away. I could see the trees and brush literally parting as if a big something was moving through it. I instantly stopped. All this happened quick, but it seemed like 10 minutes or more. I immediately stopped facing that direction, and whatever was there stopped. I couldn't see anything, but I knew it was there, right there, like it was waiting for my next move. I was frozen stiff, literally frozen. I noticed at this moment that the entire scene, the entire area was stone cold silent. No noises except my heartbeat in my throat. When I looked up towards Daisy, I saw her lifted from the ground and literally snatched or yanked into the tree line. From my viewpoint, I couldn't see her or whatever grabbed her, and I, ashamed to say, was too scared to move. I don't know why I was too scared to move. I don't know why I was even scared at all. It's like all of that emotion was just forced upon me. I was literally trembling right where I stood. It was a fear I've never felt and is so hard to convey to somebody else. I wanted to get to my dog, but I felt like if I was to make a move, whatever was to the left of me was going to get me. That's what I felt like. I snapped out of it and kind of took a couple of steps backwards, and I immediately ran back to my house. I left my sandals right there in the middle of the road, and I jumped in my truck. I hauled ass around the corner of the road, and I drove down to the point where I saw Daisy yanked into the tree line. And right as I went to get out of my truck, the truck died. It had never died before. I opened my door, and as I went to step out of the truck, once again I was frozen stiff. The same silence from a few minutes ago was still there. Now, though, I was directly next to the point of entrance where my dog was snatched into the tree line, and as I was looking through there, I couldn't see anything. I couldn't see her. I couldn't see nothing. But I had the feeling like I was being watched, and I was afraid to even step around the door of my truck. I was so scared and upset, I called my wife at work. She answered the phone. For whatever reason, I just started crying. I don't even know why I was crying. I told my wife and got Daisy. It got Daisy. I was frantic. She knew something was wrong with me. She was trying to get me to calm down and explain to her what was going on, and all I could say was I couldn't save her. I couldn't save her. Once I got off the phone with her, I mustered up enough courage to step around the door of my truck and pop the hood. I messed with the battery cables and got my truck to start, and I drove home. My wife got home from work, which was about an hour or more later. We walked down to the area where all of this took place. From one side of the road to the other, where my dog was taken, there was a set of tracks in the sand, which were really hard to make out because it was loose sand, but you could definitely tell the tracks ran across from one side of the road to the other. The crazy thing is, though, when we walked back there in the woods, there was no sign of my dog. No blood, no fur, nothing. Almost as if she just vanished, and I never saw my dog again after that day. So that would be pretty intense, man. I recently lost our dog of 15 years, whose name was Daisy. A very emotional experience to go through, and this guy is claiming that he just watched his dog just get snatched up at the tree line and just vanish into thin air, so to speak.
I was going to say, another weird similarity is you had a dog named Daisy, and the duck that we just had get killed was named Daisy.
Oh.
So I guess I'm never going to name a pet Daisy.
Yeah, maybe cryptids and monsters and everything else have it out for animals named Daisy.
When you read its name, I was like, oh, it's my duck's name. And then I didn't know you had a dog named Daisy. So very weird. I don't want to toss out that S word that people use over too much, but synchronicities.
Yeah. What I find interesting about this is to me, he's clearly trying to convey the same emotion that so many people have a hard time conveying, the amount of fear that someone feels in some of these situations. I mean, from an outsider standpoint, your dog taking off on something, at a tree line in the woods, especially whenever you already live out in the country, that's not like an out of the normal thing to happen. The fact that he was just kind of frozen with fear, and it just had that weird vibe in the air and everything that really just shook him. Obviously that could play into it psychologically. But then it's the question of, okay, are you reacting because of this intense fear that you're feeling, this anxiety, or is this fear and anxiety being caused by some outside source? And there's just really no way to tell.
I don't remember where I seen this at. I remember watching a show, and it's been a long time ago, but someone was talking about they had a dog and something grabbed the dog and picked it up, and it ripped the dog in half right in front of them.
Jeez.
You ever heard that? Have you ever heard that before?
No.
I forget what the show was, but it was a little dog. The guy was out walking it, and I don't remember if it was a Sasquatch or what it was, but he was saying I just remember it was this big creature, and it grabbed the dog, and he said it grabbed it from its mouth, and it pulled its mouth apart and just ripped it completely in half from the mouth down.
It sounds horrific.
Yeah, this is what that guy had claimed happened. And I don't remember where I'd seen that at, but I visibly remember seeing that because it was like a reenactment. It didn't obviously show the dog being ripped, but the whole setup of it, I was like, man, I don't know what I would do if I was out and someone grabbed my dog and completely ripped it in half looking at me.
I did interview a guy from New Jersey, I believe, who whenever he was a kid, he was at kind of a day camp, and he had an encounter with a Bigfoot. Nothing violent, but the Bigfoot was holding some sort of fabric that was covered in blood and half of a large dog that it looked like it had ripped in half. And needless to say, that traumatized him for life. That's something that would definitely stick with you. And then I interviewed another guy that was on a TV show where he had some crazy activity going on around his parents' property, and he had set up security cameras on the house trying to record some of it. And he actually got an incident recorded on video where one of their cats, one of their family pets, had wandered out by the tree line where he, I believe, was baiting the Bigfoot that he believed were coming onto the property. And you see on the video this cat, something in the tree line, grabs it and lifts it off the ground and pulls it into the shadows of the tree line. You can't see it anymore, but like you can see the cat being lifted and pulled like a good 6-7 feet off the ground, straight up. And then a few seconds later, it's like something tosses the cat back out of the tree line and it just walks out, just unscathed. And he actually had the theory that these were Bigfoot and that they had a relationship with the cats, that the cats were like their pets. I don't know. So it's really, you hear different stories of them being kind and gentle, and then you hear stories of them ripping the animals in half in front of their owners.
People are different. I would assume Sasquatch, if they're somehow human-like, would also have different personalities. Some people don't eat meat. Some people don't do this. Maybe they don't. Not all of them are going to be the same. Maybe some of them are more prone to kill animals. Maybe some other ones aren't.
Yeah. And it might depend on the animal, how the animal acts towards them.
Right.
All right. So we continue. I never did get a visual of what took my dog or what was on the left of me. Looking back now, after I've had years to think about it, I really feel like whatever took my dog might have been a juvenile something, and whatever was to the left of me was most likely the parent. And it was in protection mode, as if I took another step, it was going to stop me from going after its young. I feel like it was teaching the young one to hunt, maybe, and that's why all these dogs ended up going missing from the neighborhood. I can't give you a definitive answer as to what was in the woods that morning. I would like to say Sasquatch or Bigfoot, except what happened the next morning kind of stumps my thoughts on that. Even writing this brings me back to that morning, and I get restless, and my heart starts pounding, even after all this time that's passed. That night, my family and I were in the living room watching TV when we all heard someone step onto the front porch and turn the doorknob on the front door. Everyone turned to look, and I instantly jumped up in a defensive manner. The door was locked, thankfully, but when I got there to open it, I could hear whatever it was run off the porch, and when I opened it, it was gone. Everyone was left a little scared. I have 2 daughters and my son. They were 14, 12, and 10. I asked all the kids to not be outside unless I was out there with them. That night, when we were all laying down for bed, my oldest daughter came into my room, visibly shaken, saying she was hearing something growl outside her window. I went in there very quietly and sat on her bed. She was right. I could hear something growling outside her window. I was panic-stricken. Her window was the one that faces the tree line of the forest. She slept with us that night. As a father and husband and man of the house, I knew I had to do something. I at least had to go outside and look, but to be honest, I was scared. I grabbed a spotlight that I had, and I very cautiously went outside the front door and made my way around the end of the trailer house. I'm not going to lie, I was shaking the entire time. My legs were weak, and as I rounded the corner of the house and shined the spotlight down there was nothing there. I could see, however, at the bottom of a window, where the ground had been torn up, or you could tell that something had been standing there or moving around there. I went back inside and locked the door, and we went to bed. The next morning changed my entire viewpoint on the world. It actually changed who I was, changed everything about me for better or worse. It definitely took a toll on me. I'm going to stop there again because as a parent, keeping your kids safe is everything, man.
Mm-hmm.
Now you've got something trying the doorknob, something standing outside the window of your daughter's room, growling, scaring her. You're scared. You've already faced this event with the dog that left you scared. Man, that would be a tough one to go through. I mean, you're fighting with your own emotions at that point.
I don't even know how I'd react if something were visible. Like if I heard something outside my child's window, I would have ran out there, but I'm also an idiot.
Right.
That's just my mentality because I go into overprotective dad mode.
Mm-hmm.
Like we don't even really have, I live in a state where guns are always a big thing. I only have like a handgun and I borrowed a rifle. So I have that, but like what I have is not going to stop anything. If it's really a Bigfoot or whatever, it's not going to stop it. It's just going to make it very angry.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I'd even run out with a gun, but I would definitely go out and try and see what it is. But at the same time, I've always wondered this. You hear about these things looking through windows, and I feel like it's strange that if something was right outside your window, it could easily just come through the window and get you. Like, why do they not? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
When I hear stuff like this, that's the first thing I've always thought of is like, is there like unwritten rules for them that they just can't come on in? Like they try the door handle. Well, if it's so big, why couldn't it break the door down?
Oh, it for sure could. It for sure could.
That's just how my mind goes into things like this. Like, I always think of the worst part of it. I was like, man, if this thing wanted to get me or wanted to get my kid, it would just burst through the wall, through the window, snatch them up, and then take off.
Right.
And what are you going to do about it? Who's going to know? Like, no one's going to believe you that a Bigfoot come and took your kid.
Yeah. I mean, something that you and I have, certainly discussed on a regular basis is obviously you've got people that come on podcasts and tell horror stories, which are exciting and fun to listen to. But I mean, the fact of the matter is, if you just take Bigfoot, for instance, and you look at the number of Bigfoot researchers that have existed in history, not just currently, but in all time, going out on these expeditions, doing wood knocks, doing calls, baiting, doing things to elicit an encounter, some of which have been successful, some not. Some believe they were successful. But in all these instances, nobody's ever disappeared. Everyone's always came home. Nothing's bad has ever happened. There's never been, in my 20 plus years involved in this, I've heard of one instance where someone claimed to have actually been assaulted by a Bigfoot while doing research. And that story cannot be confirmed, validated, proven, or anything else. So you have to question it. I mean, you have to be skeptical about these things. But obviously, if you're talking about something that can rip up full-grown trees and place them in an X formation, they would have the ability to, like you said, pull a door off the hinges, to rip open a tent, do whatever they wanted. So we have, these stories of violent situations that have no way to confirm them, and they are just stories. But whenever we look at the actual evidence, you don't really have anything. You have situations where at the most something's thrown or a bluff charge and things of that nature. I think if they wanted to get you, they could get you. So there must be something keeping them from just doing that on a whim.
There is always the opportunity, but there is always the opportunity for them to take people when they're out and about in the woods. And I guess that could be part of some of the missing people. But say they get lost in the woods, they never find them again. I don't want to correlate that, so that's what is happening.
Right.
But I mean, it could be, or it could be a random person lost and never found again. Or I guess if someone wanted to be a serial killer, they could just hide out in the woods and get away with it. Because not trying to give anyone ideas out there. Just,
yeah. Calm down, folks. All right, moving on. I was on my porch around 4 a.m., sitting out there smoking a cigarette. I had my spotlight with me because at this point I wouldn't go outside at night without it. I was hearing something walk the edge of the tree line along the back side of the side of my house, but when I shined my light over there, I could vaguely see a figure on all fours walking behind the brush. Across from my property, there was a light on a pole from a neighboring property. Directly in front of the pole was 2 big trees. This figure walked up to these trees as I followed with my light. It then stuck its head around the tree, not yet revealing its whole body. It was a huge gray wolf head, the biggest head I have ever seen. This has to be what the woman who seen the wolf was talking about. At this moment, it seemed like I was in a vacuum. The silence was so profound, like what was happening was inside a bubble, like time was standing still. The eyes I will never forget, and I can still see them to this day. It had huge, bright green eyes. I know it sounds redundant, but it did feel like it was staring a hole right through me, looking at my soul. It then, with one hand, grabbed the tree and stood up. And he specifically says hand. It stood on both hind legs. This was around 35 to 40 yards from me. This creature was big, not bodybuilder big, but a big basketball player size profile, gray with black highlights. I was frozen and I couldn't move. I don't even remember breathing at that moment. My light was on it the entire time. I was so scared and shaking, I couldn't take my eyes off of it. At this point, I was reaching for my door handle, trying to find it so I could go inside. We were locked eye to eye, looking at each other. I'm 6'3" and my porch is 2.5 feet tall, off the ground, if that tells you how tall this thing was. It took 2 steps towards me, and at that moment I opened the door and I ran inside. I immediately went and woke up my wife. I knew she was going to be mad because I woke her up at the time that I woke her up, but when I turned the bedroom light on, she said she could instantly tell something was wrong with me because I was sweating and I was white as a ghost. I asked her and begged her to please come outside and look at this, which now I'm so glad that she did because I do not want to seem crazy to myself, and let alone trying to tell her or anybody else. At least I have her to acknowledge why I did see. I just knew that when we got back to the front door, this thing was going to be gone. To my surprise, when I opened the door and I shined the light right where it was standing, there it stood, and my wife screamed. We both stood there in shock as it dropped back down on all fours and took off into the tree line and disappeared. I know how crazy this sounds, and I know how taboo and how believing that a dogman can exist is just crazy. I know how much speculation there is, especially now that I've had all this time to look into the subject and the community and just how toxic all of it is. I sent you my story not to get you to believe me or anything like that. It really just does help me and other people who had encounters each time we share the story. It just makes it easier for us to handle. For 2 weeks after that encounter, I had terrible nightmares. Even to this day now, I'll still have the same nightmare from time to time of seeing that dogman. I can send you the picture of the big X we found in the woods. Also, I have a picture of what I believe to be a paw print on the window of my truck. I've already been through all the ridicule and judgment trying to talk to people about my story, with very few people believing what I say. I've even shared this with my brother, and while I would expect my brother to believe me, I get why he doesn't believe me. I'm not a researcher or anything like that. I'm just a normal guy that happened to have an extraordinary encounter. If you take anything away from this story, I would want you to know these things are out there. Ever since my encounter has left me jumpy, sometimes scared to go outside at night, and very open-minded to other things existing if these things can exist. This encounter really took over my life for about 1.5 years after. I wanted answers. I wanted to know why me, what were these things, how long have they been here? Of course, I haven't gotten any answers, but I had to back off. It was all I would think about, talk about, and even my own family got tired of hearing me talk about it. Not a day goes by that I don't think about it. Not a day. So, not a Bigfoot.
Now I know why you wanted to talk to me.
He sent me pictures of his property location that he used to live at. He no longer lives there. He sent me pictures of what he believes to be a paw print on his truck, I believe it was. I mean, there's something there. I didn't study it firsthand or anything, so I didn't lift the print or anything like that. It's just a photo. He sent me pictures of the X formation. It definitely looks like an X formation, just like he's describing. 2 large trees pulled up out of the ground and laid across one another, standing upright. He also sent me a picture of, the typical shadow in the tree line. Might be something, might not. But yeah, man, this guy, I don't know if it's because I do have family in the area and I know people down there, and like everything he was saying is correct about the location and everything, and his willingness to send me pictures of the location and how it's not necessarily some fantastic story,
Right?
but it's more in line of, a typical how an encounter actually goes. But, yeah, I really wanted to share this story, and I really wanted to discuss it because I believe this guy. Just going to go out there and say it. I believe this guy. If he's lying, he's got me. So what do you think now that we've reached the conclusion?
I didn't expect it to be that. A lot of it was very Sasquatchy, if that's a word, squatchy. But I can completely relate to this just because no one is going to believe it. I've dealt with it. I don't even believe my own self half the time. So it's strange to me that this thing showed itself and then it stayed there. That is the part that actually kind of stands out to me the most, is the fact that when he went and got his wife, it was still there.
Yeah.
You have validation now. Regardless of whoever else out there doesn't believe you, at least one other person was able to verify it. Maybe that's all you need. Just because you're never going to convince the world that things like this exist.
Right.
For some reason, it's not going to be an acceptable thing. There's going to be a few people that might believe you, but at the end of the day, the average person is going to be like, this person's crazy. Because that's how we're programmed to be, I guess. I don't know. It's just for so long, even with my own stuff, I've tried to rationalize it and explain it away because none of it makes sense. Biologically, how do you explain an upright walking canine?
You don't.
You can see dogs hopping around. My dog steps on like its back leg to jump up on me. It's not natural looking. They can't just walk around. And when they do, the ones that are trained in like circus dogs or whatever, they look goofy.
Yeah.
They don't look like they should be doing that. But these things apparently can do it. And it looks normal.
Well, I also think it's interesting, he specifically said hands. Dogs don't have hands.
Right. The typical Dogman lore of the hands are always described as raccoon-like.
Yeah.
I'm not a biologist, but are raccoons somehow offshoots of canines in one form or another? Like, are they? I think they were still a rodent family.
I think they're their own thing, actually. I think they have their own little subset.
Raccoons, for me, are unique just because they're very intelligent. They have the little hands. They're able to stand on their back legs. Maybe dogmen really aren't dogs. Maybe they're giant raccoon people.
Yeah.
They just look like dogs.
Or lemurs or baboons I know people get mad whenever you take it into the realm of primate.
Right.
But that's something that I've often wondered. Maybe we're not looking at a canine. Maybe we're just looking at something that looks like a canine.
I've had people talk about the possibility of kangaroos, which to me, I think anyone would know what a kangaroo looks like.
Right.
It's not going to look like a dog.
No.
But people throw that out there as a possibility that they see wild kangaroos, and that's why you're not expecting to see it. Yeah, but kangaroos' legs are a little different too.
Yeah.
So I don't really buy into the whole kangaroo thing.
No.
Getting back down on four legs and running off, that is very, it's strange. And that, to me, everyone relates this back to like werewolf type stuff. I don't necessarily believe in werewolves to the extent of people changing into a wolf. Like that aspect to the lore doesn't necessarily make sense to me.
Right.
I guess it doesn't have to make sense, but I don't see that happening. But there's been so many depictions of these type of creatures for how many years now? Like even the stories from hundreds of years ago, why were they saying, like, they had to have been influenced by something.
Right. To me, it makes more sense for people to see a wolf-like creature that had the ability to grasp with its hands and standing on two legs, to see that and be like, oh, that has to be part man. That has to be something that a man transforming into a wolf. So I could see where the werewolf lore would be derived from sightings of these things.
I just don't know how to relate it to physically possible. And that's where I always come back to and I always struggle with is, for me, I can see wolves, like the aspect of wolves. It's just when the hands and the standing up part, it just biologically doesn't make any sort of sense. So I don't know. And then there's a whole lot of different aspects to them depending on the versions of the stories you hear from people too. So it almost has that weird, a lot of people don't even believe they're actually physical things. They're spiritual type things.
Right.
So I do have a question, and if he ends up listening, maybe he can write back to you. This area, is there any sort of like Native American area or like cemeteries or something within close proximity? Because for some reason, everyone keeps throwing this out lately that they've been looking into Dogman, and for some reason, there's always a cemetery or something within a few miles from where these incidents happen.
I mean, I don't know about this specific location, but yeah, it's definitely old land. As a matter of fact, my family that lives down there, their property is in a very similar area as this guy's property, like neighboring the national forest. It's all wooded, it's extremely rugged and rural. And at the end of their road is this old abandoned church, just a single room church that's, probably a couple 100 years with a small cemetery next to it. And it's been empty as long as anybody can remember. And there's things like that all around this area.
Mm-hmm.
So a Native American cemetery or burial site wouldn't surprise me in the least. And this area also has a history of Bigfoot sightings and Bigfoot activity. It's not just Dogman. This is the first time I've heard a Dogman story from this area. I'm sure people involved in the Dogman world have probably heard more besides this, but for me personally, this was the first. The X formations, like the guy said, he looked up X formations on the internet, and the first thing that popped up was Sasquatch, and so that's kind of where his head went. That makes sense. Otherwise, there's a few similarities behavior-wise, something coming up to the window, things like that. I don't know if he was dealing with one thing or if there might be multiple things in the area, or if some things that were taking place were just being attributed to this thing because of the crazy experiences he had. But it is really surprising, the part, where he spots this thing and hits it with a light and then goes inside and gets his wife and brings her out there and it's still there.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that pets were going missing, animals were going missing out of yards, that he heard the growling outside the window. If we go down the speculation road and say that all of these were attributed to that specific creature, whatever it was, its behavior says it's getting braver. It's not afraid of people. It doesn't really care if it gets seen.
How many years ago was this?
This happened in 2019.
Okay, so not that long ago.
Not that long ago.
Here's what I've noticed when it comes to Dogman stuff, and I'm no expert. I don't really think anyone is. But you have people that say they see these things eating roadkill.
Mm-hmm.
If it's a spiritual type elemental creature, why would it be eating something? And then you have other people that say these things just, almost like with Bigfoot, they appear and they just disappear. Because he even said he didn't, like the dog just completely vanished.
Yeah.
But did he see anything? Like he didn't see what grabbed the dog.
Right.
So how is, like, if you're able to see it and something showing itself to you, I feel like you'd somehow been able to see something grabbing the dog too. He didn't say what type of dog it was, did he? Like how big it was?
No, he didn't.
Because this was like a full grown, like a lab. And that's even more impressive if someone just picked it up and snatched it, because that would have to be, what's a lab, about 70 pounds.
Yeah.
So, but if it's a smaller dog, then I could see something grabbing it too. But like, still, even a full grown dog is, I don't know, like a 20-pound dog, unless it's a little Yorkie dog, then I guess it wouldn't take much to pick that up. But when I think of dogs, I usually don't think of like small dogs. It's usually someone's 20 to 30-pound dog.
Right.
So again, something picking up a full-grown dog and snatching off with it has to be strong enough to lift that. Even just a normal wolf.
Another thing that I try to take into consideration is whatever snatched up his dog in front of him did so without the dog yelping or barking or biting or anything.
Right.
It dispatched of the dog relatively quickly. He didn't see any signs of blood. He didn't mention anything about any horrific noises or anything. The dog was just gone. And he specifically says he saw it getting yanked into the tree line.
Right.
It wasn't just like the dog just like wandered off into the woods barking or whatever and then stopped. So I don't know, man. I don't know, but like I said, I just believe this guy. And like he's, corresponded with me since then. And like I said, he didn't feel comfortable coming on air and telling his story. And, from the original email, it sounds like it's, had a traumatizing effect on him and it still bothers him. So like, I have no issue with that. People don't have to come on and share their story. I'm fine with that.
Right. Sometimes just even writing it out and talking to someone about it is helpful, because I can relate to things in the sense that I never talked about whatever happened with me, really, because no one's going to believe it anyways, and they're just going to think you're crazy. So how do you deal with it?
Yeah.
My apparent way of dealing with it was I ended up starting a show.
Yeah.
To cope with not being able to talk about it. So I want to talk to other people, because I felt like that was my only way of not feeling crazy. We all deal with things in our own manner.
I tell people that all the time, doing this show and talking to witnesses about their experiences is as much for me as it is for them. It helps me deal with my own stuff as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's been a tremendous tool in helping me try to rationalize my own experiences, if that's the right way to phrase it.
Yeah.
Before we get off here, you're going to have a busy weekend, huh?
Yeah. I have the first annual Indiana Bigfoot Conference in Nashville, Indiana, tomorrow and Saturday. So if this drops on Friday, it'll be today and tomorrow. So for anyone that happens to listen to this and you want to come to Nashville, Indiana, come out and talk to me.
Yeah.
It is free to the public. If they have speaking guests, but that area is completely sold out. It's sold out in a matter of a couple of weeks, which is surprising.
For a first annual, yeah.
I don't know what the seating capacity was. I thought it was a couple hundred, but they managed to sell them. The tickets were kind of on the pricier side, I thought, but that's sold out. But like where the vendors are and the other stuff that's open to the public, that's from 4 to 8 on Friday and 8 to 8 Saturday. So they encourage everyone to come out. It's at the Four Seasons Lodge in Nashville, Indiana.
And you have a booth. What's going on at your booth?
I will have my recording rig set up, and I'll be able to talk with people if they want to talk with me for a quick little interview. I also have my shirts there. I have stickers there. Just kind of a meet and greet with people. So anyone wants to come up and talk to me. I know there's a few people that listen to my show that's supposed to be coming out, so they want to talk to me. So I'll be kind of cool. Hopefully no one is angered by me and wants to talk to me and yell at me, but I guess if they want to, that's fine too.
No weirdos.
I tend to say things that might make people angry, but that's just kind of how I am. I'm not here to sugarcoat things sometimes. But yeah, that's the weekend. And then I guess I have a couple other ones coming up here in October too. They're not Bigfoot related, but they're more paranormal. I'm actually speaking at those. The one just so happens to be on the same road where I had my encounter back in 2007.
Oh, wow.
It's literally like a mile and a half down the road from where it happened. So I'm going to be up there talking about it, and I'm sure the whole community here will think I'm a whack job afterwards. Like, this guy's crazy. But it is what it is.
You should offer to take people to the location.
I'm going to tell them exactly where it's at. You get out here on the main strip road right out in front, and you take a left, head towards the highway, and go about a mile. And once it gets to kind of wooded, you'll know exactly where it's at. They just built a brand new house right there, like 2 years ago. When we happen to drive by through there, my kid makes a joke every now and then when we go down the road if we're going to see Dogman. And I always say, if we do, I'm running him over.
Yeah.
It creeped me out one night. We were coming down the road and they'd put lights out. So I saw the lights and they're up a little bit. And we thought they were eyeballs. And I got excited for a second. I was like, come on. And we got there and I was disappointed to find out that it's not what I was hoping it was. Because that is my mentality. And I've already told everyone in my family, I was like, if something ever runs out, I am not slamming on the brakes. I'm slamming on the gas pedal.
Yeah.
So fair warning for anyone out investigating, don't dress up as a werewolf because you might get ran over.
There was a guy that was hoaxing Bigfoot stuff along a road and actually got hit by a car and killed. Like it's a for real thing that can happen. I'm not going to make a joke about it, but I guess laughing is enough. But yeah, don't don't try to be funny. Just don't do it.
For anyone out there that thinks they're amusing people by trying to hoax things by dressing in costumes and running out there and trying to scare traffic, just know they might swerve and hit you. You might cause an accident, or they might get out of a vehicle and shoot you because they think that's what they've been looking for the last 15 years. Just be aware.
Yeah. If you see a vehicle with a tinfoil tail sticker on it, stay in the brush.
Right. Don't come out because I'm getting proof one way or another.
Well, man, where can people find you? What's going on with the podcast? All that good stuff.
Easiest way to find me is pretty much wherever you listen to Bigfoot Crossroads. You should be able to find tinfoil tales. Just make sure it is the actual my tinfoil tales, not the Australian tinfoil tales.
Right.
For some reason, that's still a thing that people. I've gotten message recently like, I didn't know you're Australian. I was like, I'm not. If you happen to hear an Australian person speaking, that's not me.
You do have a pretty thick Australian accent, to be honest.
Well, there's some people who've been on my show that don't even believe Australia exists. So there's that. So if I have an Australian accent, I'm an actor. But no, as far as the show goes, there's just booked out quite a bit for interviews and just dropping 2 episodes a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays. And I started throwing a throwback Thursday on Sundays. So it's Second Look Sundays. Finding old episodes and I end up hating them because I sound so weird and awkward because I wasn't used to talking to people. I'm a very much an introvert and very antisocial. So this was weird for me for the first 6 months because it wasn't anything that I wanted to do. You know what I mean? Like it was just strange. I wasn't used to talking to people, especially about weird stuff. But now it's not that big of a deal. I'm just kind of used to it at this point. Like, well, I'm 150 episodes in on this. I might as well be used to it.
I mean, it's a pretty good combination, though. Somebody that doesn't want to talk to people about stuff and people that don't want to talk to people about the stuff they've experienced.
Right.
Getting together and talking about it. Makes sense.
It is an awkward situation for everyone involved, but it ends up coming out and seems to do well for what it does, I guess. I don't know. I know with the last time we'd spoke, you'd actually mentioned it. The podcast or whatever, I did apparently win 2 awards.
Yeah.
So that was kind of cool.
Yeah. Are you going to have those awards on display?
No, I'm not going to be that guy. I could completely be that guy, but for the most part, I try and stay humble.
Well, thanks for coming on here, man, sitting in with me and discussing this encounter. It's quite a doozy in my books, but yeah, I've enjoyed it, man. And if you're going to be in Nashville, Indiana this weekend, stop by and see Brandon with Tinfoil Tales Podcast. Have your picture taken with an award-winning podcaster at the first annual Indiana Bigfoot Conference and Convention of Nashville, Indiana.
If you're not familiar with Nashville, it is a beautiful place. It is like, I wouldn't call them mountains. It's very hilly for Indiana. We're usually flat farmland, but down there, I love it. It's very squatchy. It's there's been a lot of that's why they're doing it down there, because that's one of the biggest hot spots for the state of Indiana.
And people do love squatchy places.
I actually was contacted by someone from the area a while back, and I've been meaning to reach back out with them. They didn't want to come on the show, but they were afraid for their family. It's kind of reminiscent of what we just talked about, but so there is not just Sasquatch in the area, because from what he claims he'd seen, it was very Dogmanish. So there's that. Very interesting. But, well, Matt, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah. And if you've had your own encounter that you'd like to share on the podcast, send me an email at bigfootcrossroads@gmail.com. Check out the website, bigfootcrossroads.com. You can find links to social media, past episodes, merchandise, everything you need all in one place. And until next time, remember, there's something in the woods.